For the last couple of years, the Canadian housing market has felt, well, kind of stuck, right? Buyers have been waiting on the sidelines, sellers have been hesitant to list. So, is all that about to change? Today, we're going to break down the major forecasts for 2026 to figure out where the market is really headed. And this is the million-dollar question, isn't it? After years of just absolute volatility, are we about to see a major shift? And look, the answer isn't a simple yes or no. It's a bit more nuanced, and it really all boils down to one single super important word. And that word, it's normalization. Seriously, if you only remember one thing from our whole chat today, make it this. Those absolutely wild swings we saw during the pandemic, yeah, they're over. We're not looking at some massive crash, but don't expect another crazy boom either. We're heading for a more balanced, more sustainable market. Okay, so what does normalization actually mean here? It just means the market is, finding its groove again. A steadier, more predictable pace where the fundamentals, like income and interest rates, actually matter again. Think stability, not drama. All right, so to really get a grip on what this new normal looks like, here's what we're going to cover. First, we'll unpack the tension between sales numbers and prices. Then, we're going to dive into the crucial story of Canada's two very different markets. We'll also tackle the new reality of interest rates, and then the most important part, we'll turn all this info into a real-world game plan for you. All right, first up, let's dive into the core tension in this whole forecast. And that's this fascinating push and pull between how many homes are selling and what's happening with their prices. So here's the good news. Activity is finally expected to pick up. The Canadian Real Estate Association, you'll hear them called CREA, they're forecasting around 509,000 home sales in 2026. That's a pretty solid 7 to 8% jump over the previous year. It means more people are finally getting back into the game. Okay, but this is where things get, well, really interesting. Because while pretty much every expert agrees sales are going up, they are totally split on what's going to happen to prices. So are prices going to go up, or are they going to go down?
And believe me, this isn't a small disagreement. The divide is pretty stark. On one side, you've got the big players like CREA and Royal LePage, and they're calling for some modest price growth. But then you have RE/MAX Canada, a pretty big voice in the industry, and they're way out on their own, forecasting a national average price decline. Yeah, a decline, even with more homes being sold.
Look at this. This level of uncertainty tells you a lot. You've got forecasts for a small gain sitting right next to a forecast for an almost 4% drop. When you see a split that wide, it's a huge red flag that just looking at the national average is totally missing the point. So, to make any sense of these numbers, we have to dig a little deeper. And this is really the aha moment of the entire forecast. The idea that Canada doesn't just have one housing market, it actually has at least two. Okay, here's the key takeaway on this section. Looking at the national average price, it's becoming pretty much useless. Real estate is local, always has been. And in 2026, that's truer than ever. Seriously, what's happening in a city like Vancouver is the complete opposite of what's going on in, say, Calgary. So what we're seeing is this really clear split. In one corner, you've got what we can call correction markets. Think the GTA, Greater Vancouver. Here, prices have basically hit what's called an affordability ceiling. They've just gotten too expensive for most people. So in those spots, prices are looking flat or might even dip a bit. But then in the other corner, you've got growth markets. We're talking places like Alberta, parts of Quebec, and Atlantic Canada. These areas are still pretty affordable, so they're actually drawing people in from other provinces, and their markets are outperforming. So you gotta ask, what's behind this two-speed market? Well, a huge part of the answer is the new reality of interest rates. It's the big economic force that's shaping, well, everything. The most important thing to get here is that it's all about a shift in mindset. For the last couple of years, it felt like everyone was just holding their breath, waiting for big rate cuts to come and save the day. Well, that waiting game, it's over. The market is finally starting to accept that today's higher rates, they're kind of the new normal. It's not about hoping for massive relief anymore. It's about finding stability. And man, this quote just hits the nail on the head. That market we saw back in 2020 and 2021, that was a total anomaly, a once-in-a-generation thing. So 2026 is all about adapting to how things are, not just wishing for a return to a past that, let's be honest, probably isn't coming back. Okay, so we've gone through all the big picture trends. Now for the good part. Let's make this real. What does this all mean for you? Whether you're thinking of buying, selling, or renting in 2026, here's your game plan. All right, for all you potential buyers out there, 2026 is your year for preparation. In this more balanced market, the advantage is going to go to the people who are prepared. That means getting your financing sorted out ahead of time and having realistic expectations. Being flexible on where you buy. Maybe even taking a serious look at some of those growth markets we talked about. That could be your secret weapon. Now, it's not a fire sale, but the good news is you'll have way more breathing room. Those crazy bidding wars, way less common. You can actually take your time and make a smart choice. Okay, switching gears. For sellers, the name of the game is precision. Those days of just slapping any price tag on your home and watching a lineup form, yeah, those are over. Pricing your place correctly, right from day one, is absolutely critical. And you know what? The condition of your property actually matters again. Buyers can afford to be patient, so you've really got to put your best foot forward. And what about renters? Well, for you, 2026 is what I'd call a preparation window. It's a fantastic year to really focus on getting your financial house in order, strengthening your credit, building up your savings, all without that crazy pressure to jump in and buy right now. You can use this time to scout things out, maybe even identify which of those growth markets could be a good fit for you in the future. All right, so let's tie this all together. What's the final, ultimate takeaway from the 2026 forecast? You know, this quote just perfectly captures everything we've been talking about. It's not about trying to be a genius and perfectly time the market anymore. That's a fool's game. Success now comes from really understanding these new, more normal conditions and then making smart strategic moves within them.
So look, all the signs are pointing to the Canadian housing market finally settling down and finding a more sustainable rhythm. The chaos seems to be fading, and in its place is something a lot more predictable. Maybe still challenging, but predictable. So the only question left to ask is, now that you know all this, what's your next move?